Backstage, NBC Studios, Burbank, 1995. The final red light on the on-air panel has gone dark, yet the roar of the studio audience still vibrates through the cinder block walls. In a narrow room that smells of hairspray, hot cables, and wilted lilies left over from yesterday's talk show guest, Michael Jackson has folded himself onto the carpet, knees drawn to his chest, back to the mirror. The bulb-framed glass throws pale halos across the floor, but he keeps to the one patch of shadow, head bowed, sequin cuffs gone dull in the half-light. Outside, handlers clear corridors with radios that chirp like mechanical crickets. Inside, only the low hum of the air vent dares to interrupt the silence he craves. A hinge squeaks. 10-year-old Abby, daughter of the wardrobe mistress, slips in, clutching a styrofoam cup of orange juice. She has seen Michael from wings and green rooms since she was 5. Yet she still gazes at him as if he were an undiscovered constellation. Tonight, emboldened by the hush, she crosses the floorboards that separate legend from child. She kneels, her patent leather shoes creaking, and asks, with the blunt innocence only children can risk, "Michael, why do you believe in Jesus?" The question lands like a soft-tipped arrow, but Michael shudders as though struck through. For a heartbeat, he is afraid to breathe. Cameras had never asked. Interviewers never dared. But this small voice has unlatched a chamber he has kept bolted for decades. He looks at her, wide brown eyes, a crooked bow in her hair, and finds no judgment, only waiting. The neon blue clock above the door clicks to 10:17 p.m. Somewhere down the hall, a synth riff from the closing credits band sputters, then dies. Silence returns, dense as velvet. Michael draws one measured breath, then another, tasting the dry metal of backstage dust on his tongue. His lips part, and out tumbles a thread of words, hushed, almost surprised to find themselves audible. He begins to speak, not the polished anecdotes, not the sugar-armored jokes, but the real story, the frightened boy in Gary, the hymns murmured beneath motel sheets, the stage lights that promised heaven, yet scorched like desert sun, the night he saw Christ in a dream and woke trembling, because the gaze felt kind. Each sentence seems to loosen another knot inside his ribcage. Abby listens, fingertips pressed to the floor, as though anchoring herself against a swell. When Michael pauses, her only movement is the gentle nod that says, "Go on." And so he does, words gathering force, memory folding over memory, until the room itself feels suspended. Late-night corridors, buzzing fluorescents, security chatter, all held at bay by one impossible confession finally finding its voice. 1974, Gary, Indiana. The Jackson house sits wedged between a boarded-up grocery and a tire shop that smells of scorched rubber. Yet, within its narrow rooms reign a discipline older than the neighborhood. Dawn breaks to Joseph's whistle slicing the chill, 6 shrill notes that summon his children as surely as any church bell. 16-year-old Michael slides from the top bunk, feet landing on linoleum cold enough to bite. He is nimble, but exhaustion leaks from his shoulders. They had returned from a Columbus concert at 3 a.m., and the scent of dry ice still clings to his afro sheen. Catherine stands by the stove, Bible open, frying cornmeal mush that hisses like small storms. On the back cover is a watchtower illustration. Paradise in pastel colors, lions reclining near baskets of fruit. Michael loves the picture, yet fears the prophecy. Only the righteous will survive Armageddon. The words ring louder than any applause. In the cramped living room, a single speaker crackles, "I'll be there," Yesterday's applause trapped in the magnetic tape. Joseph studies the family's stage outfits draped over a chair. Gold lame lapels, flared cuffs. "Worldly," he mutters, jaw tight. "You'll not lead your brothers to damnation with Vegas trash." Michael swallows. The same costumes had set Cincinnati screaming, made him feel briefly limitless. Now, under Joseph's glare, they look like forbidden idols. Tension crackles, unspoken yet everywhere, beneath ceiling stains, in torn guitar straps, inside Michael's chest, where duty wrestles desire. Stage life offers a counterfeit freedom. At night, arenas bloom like electric cathedrals, and Michael, spotlight-bathed, can forget the ticking of watchtower warnings. But every show ends, every city empties, and the silence of the tour bus becomes a confessional. He presses his forehead to the window, watching interstate lamps streak into comets, and prays in the dark. "Jehovah, please don't take the music away. It's the only place I feel clean." The first crack in certainty arrives on a rain-slick April evening outside Chicago. A drunk driver swerves across the meridian, striking a station wagon that had carried a young fan to the matinee. Later, during their second set, Michael spots the child's mother in the balcony, her face ruptured by grief. The song in his throat turns to gravel. If Jehovah sees everything, he wonders, why does he allow this? The question roots deep, cold as iron. That summer, Motown flies the brothers to London. Michael steps into Westminster Abbey, humid breath fogging beneath vaults older than his nation. No usher hustles him toward literature, no elder condemns sequins. Instead, candlelight trembles across stone kings and crucified Christ, dwarfed by shadowed arches. He exhales, the sound strangely free, and whispers to Marlon, "God feels bigger here, like he's not only rules." The words scare him, yet thrill too. They taste of continents yet unnamed inside him. Back in Los Angeles, recording sessions stretch past midnight. Quincy Jones teases bass lines while Michael, between takes, flips through Revelation. Verses promising fiery judgment clash with bass drum thuds that make his heart dance. Some nights he dozes on the studio couch, Bible as pillow. Dreams blur. Floodlights that morph into white horses of apocalypse. Crowds dissolve into clouds. At the center stands a silent figure in linen, eyes like rivers. In one dream, the figure sits among the audience at the Forum. No halo, no thunder, only a look that seems to know every hidden bruise inside Michael's soul and loves him still. He wakes gasping, sweat chilling on his sternum, unsure whether to rejoice or repent. Autumn 1976. During rehearsal, Joseph erupts over a rhinestone glove prototype. "Foolish vanity, Michael!" and storms out, leaving a fissure that reverberates long after cymbals stop ringing. Michael retreats to an alley behind the soundstage, hands shaking, breath visible in November air. LaToya finds him there, offers a thermos of cocoa. Words pour out. Fear of Armageddon, terror that success is a snare, the dream of the watching Christ. She wraps an arm around his shoulders, whispers, "Love casts out fear. Maybe start there." It is the gentlest scripture he has ever heard. Late that night, Michael writes lyrics in a spiral notebook, each line a quiet revolt. "Love is the only star I follow." He does not show them to Joseph. Instead, he folds the page, slides it between the Bible's thin onion skin leaves, hiding doubt inside doctrine, seed inside soil, hoping one day it might bloom. On New Year's Eve 1977, the Jacksons headline a snowy Denver arena. As fireworks stutter overhead, Michael holds the mic, sweat freezing on his collar, and feels the moment split like ice beneath weight. Thunderous adoration on one side, a winter-quiet hunger for something vaster on the other. He ends the show on his knees, spotlight circling him like a lone moon. The crowd thinks it artistry. Only Michael knows it is supplication. Backstage, a roadie slaps his back. "Happy New Year, man!" But the words echo hollow. Michael glances at his reflection in a cracked dressing room mirror. Glitter. Mascara. Tears he didn't know had fallen. Somewhere beyond the concrete walls, dawn is tipping toward 1978. He wonders whether the god of watchtowers will follow him there, or whether a different god waits, patient, just past the edge of the stage lights. The question thrums louder than the encore that still quivers in the rafters, and he walks toward it, heartbeat drumming a rhythm no audience can hear. Night settles over Sunset Boulevard like a velvet curtain stitched with neon. Michael's limousine glides past palm trees and blinking marquees, but he barely notices the city flossing its glamour against the glass. In his lap lies a worn, mint-green Gideon Bible, the thin pages rippling beneath the air-conditioning vent. Every traffic light flare paints his reflection crimson, then emerald, then gold, and he wonders which color feels least like a warning. He is 21 now, no longer the silver-voiced boy the industry could pat on the head. Off the Wall has detonated, 5 top 10 singles, stadiums chanting his name as if it were sacrament. Yet the afterglow feels strangely hollow. Fame fills rooms yet empties hearts, a paradox he carries like low-grade fever. Between rehearsals he lingers in hotel corridors where carpet smells of stale champagne, listening to echoes fade. Sometimes the silence is so complete he can hear his pulse drumming behind his eardrums. In those moments, he grips the Bible harder, as though the linen thread binding could keep his own seams from tearing. Studio A at Westlake on Beverly is another kind of temple. Walls padded with charcoal foam, red record light glowing like a vigil candle. Quincy Jones prowls the console, coaxing brass stabs and conga ticks into lattices of groove. Michael, headphones tilted, closes his eyes and slides into "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough." The chorus lifts him clear of gravity, yet even here, a vague dread shadows each note. Am I praising God or myself? Sweat beads beneath the brim of his fedora, salty reminder that ecstasy and anxiety often share a backbone. Back home in Encino, Catherine waits at the breakfast nook, hands folded over the watchtower. She has clipped an article decrying disco as noise that stirs carnal cravings. When Michael kisses her cheek, she squeezes his fingers, eyes kind yet worried. Jehovah asks modesty, Michael. I know, Mother. He means it. Still, he feels the tug of destiny straining every modest seam. On Sundays, he joins field service, knock-knocking at sun-bleached doors, offering pamphlets about paradise restored. Some homeowners blink, shocked to see a superstar on the porch. Michael bows his head, voice soft. We're sharing good news. Yet each refusal lodges like grit beneath a contact lens. He begins to suspect proselytizing should taste like joy, not obligation. Autumn 1982, Henson Studios. Thriller. Sessions pulse past midnight, caffeine and bass throbbing in the walls. Engineer Bruce Swedian hoists faders. Michael moonwalks barefoot across slick parquet to test rhythmic feel. Out of nowhere, the idea arrives. A short film dripping with fog, werewolves, Vincent Price's cackle. The crew cheers. Michael's gut knots. Horror tropes. Undead dances. Will his congregation call it blasphemy? The phone call with Catherine confirms his fear. Demons, Michael. You know what the scriptures say. He gazes through the control room glass, where choreographers sketch claw-hand poses, and he feels the chasm widen between Mother's faith and his art's demands. That night he places the Bible beneath his pillow as always, but sleep refuses. Images spool behind his eyelids. Watchtower trumpets, zombie ensembles, newspaper headlines he has not yet lived. At 3:17 a.m. he sits up, whispers into the dark, "Father, I don't want to mislead the children who trust me." For the first time ever, the prayer is not formal petition, but conversation, like phoning a friend too late to mind the hour. John Landis arrives 2 days later, eyes alight with cinematic mischief. He talks of childhood matinees, of monster movies teaching us to laugh at fear. Michael listens, shoulders gradually unclenching. It's a fairy tale, Landis insists, about facing what scares you and dancing anyway. The phrase lodges like a key. Still, conscience needs balm. Michael drafts a disclaimer for the opening credits, clarifying no endorsement of the occult. Lawyers quibble over phrasing. Witness elders remain skeptical. But inside Michael, something rights itself. A compass settling true north. I can honor God without shrinking the gift he placed in me. Meanwhile, Billie Jean gestates. The bass line prowls like a cat at midnight, hi-hat sizzling. During vocals, Michael feels his heartbeat sink to the drum machine, yet each lyric about paternity accusation slices too close to the bone. Headlines lurk at the periphery of every note. Fame's tax auditors, always on time. Between takes, he retreats to the isolation booth, switching off the light so only the LED from the tape deck pulses. In darkness, he quotes Psalm 23 under his breath, not as performance, but as lifeline. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Months later, premiere night of the Thriller short film at the Crest Theater. Spotlights rake Hollywood Boulevard. Limousines disgorge Diana Ross, Eddie Murphy, Fred Astaire, moving stiffly with his cane. Inside, as the opening howl rattles loudspeakers, Michael's palms sweat so fiercely the velvet armrests darken. He braces for boos from unseen elders. Instead, the audience erupts, laughter, shrieks, applause tumbling together like carnival fireworks. Midway through the graveyard set piece, a girl in row 3 leaps up, mimicking zombie choreography with abandon. Michael's throat tightens, not with vanity but relief. Art, it seems, can exorcise dread rather than summon it. Backstage afterward, he wanders a service corridor littered with popcorn boxes, mind ringing. Quincy catches up, claps a hand on his shoulder. You just reinvented music video, kid. Michael nods, but inwardly he hears a quieter verdict, one not measured in chart positions. Perfect love casts out fear. Tonight, love feels bigger than doctrine, bigger than the billboard on Sunset counting Thriller on sales in red digits. It is a pulse that rose inside him when he spoke to God as companion and found no lightning strike in reply. Approaching Christmas 1982, he flies to New York for Saturday Night Live. Snow freckles the limousine roof. Times Square billboards flash his grin 20 stories tall. Alone at the plaza, he orders warm milk, drags an armchair to the window, and watches taxis smear yellow commas through slush. Bible open on his knees, he rereads the Gospels, seeking not rules, but heartbeat. Outside, distant carolers drift through silent night, their breath fog making halos around street lamps. Michael hums along, voice barely louder than the radiator hiss, and discovers something radical. He is singing not to appease heaven or arena, but because the melody itself feels like home. Hours before dawn, he closes the scripture, slips it beneath the mattress instead of the pillow, and lies back. For once, the room isn't ringing with what-ifs. Somewhere down the hall, an elevator dings. The city exhales. Michael lets eyelids fall, certain of only one thing. The journey has pivoted. God is no longer warden, but fellow traveler. And the road ahead, lit by marquee bulbs and maybe even crucifixes he has yet to meet, stretches wide, dangerous, irresistible. Fame will roar louder. Critics will sharpen knives. But tonight, he sleeps unafraid. Heartbeat drumming a lullaby that belongs neither to witness nor world, but to the friend who met him in the dark and stayed till morning. Thunder. That's what 45,000 voices sound like when the house lights snap off in a domed stadium. The first synthesizer stab of "Wanna Be Startin' Something" ignites an uproar so fierce the risers tremble beneath boot soles. Michael feels it travel up his spine like a lightning rod. For 14 hot seconds he stands motionless, fedora brim hiding his eyes, silver-spangled jacket glinting in the strobe bursts. The noise crests, tidal, mind-splitting, and he bursts into motion, lean frame carving geometry from air. Each glide, each toe stand, each barked falsetto sends the roar spiraling higher, until performer and audience feed on the same wildfire of need. Yet the instant the encore ends, silence clamps down. Security hustles him through an underground tunnel that smells of diesel and spilled beer. His chest still booms with adrenaline, but the corridor swallows echoes whole. By the time he reaches the waiting town car, his pulse has nowhere left to go. He slides in. Door thumps shut, and the absence of sound is so violent, it steals breath. Victory Tour, sold out, record-breaking, has become a moving palace of applause. But the throne room always evaporates at midnight, leaving its king alone with ringing ears. I can't live inside a void between earthquakes, he thinks, as downtown Dallas recedes in tinted glass. The thought is not complaint, it is diagnosis. Weeks later, helicopters thud over Santa Ynez Valley, rotors scattering starlings from live oak branches. Michael stands beside the realtor, wind whipping his ponytail, scanning acres of rolling pasture framed by purple mountains. A small lake flashes below like a dropped coin. Beyond the fence, a stallion paws dusty earth. Knickers, then bolts, mane bright as brush fire in the afternoon sun. Something inside him exhales. Here is land wide enough to hold a runaway imagination, land where music might echo without ricocheting off tabloid walls. The purchase happens in a blur of signatures. Sycamore Valley Ranch today, Neverland tomorrow, though the name he chooses days later feels inevitable. Peter Pan never grew old, but Michael wants more than endless youth. He wants sanctuary, an address where children's laughter can drown out the ticking of judgments. By spring, crews install tracks for a narrow-gauge railway. A calliope pipe organ waits in a crate stamped Germany. At dusk, Michael wanders unfinished gardens, stepping over irrigation trenches, envisioning giraffes browsing acacia, while string quartets play Debussy on the lawn. Often he carries a pocket New Testament, thumbing pages as hummingbirds dip into trumpet vines. The property is still raw, hammer thuds, concrete dust. But the silence between blows feels merciful, like gauze on sunburn. July 1985. Backstage in Toronto, a stagehand leads a frail boy named Graham into Michael's dressing room. Graham's skin is paper-thin, IV bruises blooming like watercolor at his elbows. A hospital bracelet slides loose on his wrist. Someone has cut holes in it to fit over swelling. He offers Michael a crumpled Polaroid, himself in a hospital bed, posters of E.T. and the Nativity taped side by side above the headboard. "I prayed you'd stay safe on tour," Graham whispers, eyes shining behind owl-round glasses. "You're good, like Jesus is good." The comparison slices deeper than any gossip column ever could. Michael kneels, unsure how to respond without shattering under the weight of that innocent theology. He presses a sequined glove into Graham's trembling hands, and the child's smile detonates, bright, unfiltered. After Graham leaves, Michael folds forward, forehead to carpet, shoulders quaking in sobs that taste of salt and dust and holy fear. If kindness is all it takes for someone to see Christ in me, he thinks, then I have to become the mirror. The next night, back in Los Angeles, he calls songwriter Sida Garrett to the house. At the piano, he pounds out a gospel-tinged progression, voice raw from weeping yet buoyed by resolve. They scrawl lyrics on hotel stationery, verses sharpening around a single image. That the only face we can truly change is the one in our own reflection. Dawn stains the curtains pink as they layer choir harmonies. Michael records the demo before breakfast, tears returning when the final modulation lifts the melody skyward. Man in the Mirror is born less of pop calculus than humble confession, and every note bears Graham's fingerprint. News of the song's fervor reaches Brooklyn Heights Kingdom Hall, where Jehovah's Witness elders already grumble about Thriller's worldly spectacle. A formal letter arrives. Michael Joseph Jackson is requested to appear before a committee to discuss conduct unbecoming. He flies coach, an act of deference, wearing a gray suit that feels like borrowed skin. In a windowless room hung with fluorescent crucibles of light, 3 elders sit behind a folding table, Bibles closed, but present like unsheathed blades. They speak of dance moves that suggest sensuality, of magazine covers flirting with idolatry, of global renown threatening humility. Michael listens, heart thrumming, imagining the child in Toronto who had recognized goodness rather than sin. When invited to respond, he folds his palms. "I have tried to serve Jehovah with my gifts," he begins, voice even, "but maybe his gifts are larger than the boxes we build." The words float, fragile yet unyielding. The session lasts 2 draining hours. He emerges marked, unofficially shunned until further notice, a limbo where greetings fade and invitations vanish. On the flight home, he gazes at cloud tops bruised violet by sunset. Grief coils, but beneath it blooms unexpected relief. The stage that once felt like exile might now be altar. The songs might yet be sermon. Neverland, October 1986. Dawn threads gold through mist pooling over the pastures. Michael walks alone beside a fence, jacket collar turned up. Gospel of John tucked in pocket. Elk prints stipple the wet grass. Somewhere a calliope test whistles a single wavering note, as if the park itself is clearing its throat for future laughter. He climbs a low hill, where an unfinished Ferris wheel juts into pale sky, like an apostrophe in some unwritten sentence. He sits, opens the pocket Bible to chapter 15. I am the vine, ye are the branches. Wind flicks pages. Deer lift their heads, then resume grazing. Michael reads aloud, softly, words threading warm through the chill air. Halfway through, he realizes tears are falling, not of sorrow this time, but of homecoming. For years he had feared love was conditional, measured in door-to-door hours, in fabric modesty inches, in disclaimers on music videos. Here, with mud on his shoes and calluses on his fingertips, he feels embraced by a presence that delights in carousel lights and gospel chords alike. That afternoon, he returns to Los Angeles to finish Bad. During vocal takes for Leave Me Alone, cynicism threatens to harden. Yet when the engineer rolls tape on the bridge, he remembers the field at sunrise and softens the edge. The record will roar with bravado, but hidden between drum fills lies a quieter message. Freedom is holy. Kindness revolutionary. Christmas Eve, 1987. Neverland is finally ablaze with life. Twinkling lights trace roof lines. A steam train loops lazy circles. Whistle, echoing off eucalyptus groves. Dozens of foster children spin on the merry-go-round, their shrieks of delight rising like choir descants. Michael stands near a popcorn cart, scarf fluttering, watching caretakers lift a bedridden girl onto a sleigh ride. Her laugh rings pure, unafraid of tomorrow. The scene stings his eyes with gratitude so fierce, it almost hurts. In the great house later, fireplace popping, he writes in a leather journal, Tonight, the kingdom of heaven looks like cotton candy mustaches and grass stains. If that is blasphemy, then I will remain a heretic, singing hymns of moonwalk and mercy. He closes the book. Outside, fireflies of camera flashes flicker through sycamores, paparazzi perched beyond gates. But their lenses cannot capture what matters. A man who once begged for permission to breathe now inhales wide-open night and tastes redemption on the breeze. The hour slips toward midnight. Michael steps onto the porch, head tipped back to star-patched sky, and whispers a single line borrowed from the words that set him free. Abide in me. The wind answers with cedar scent and distant carousel music. And for the first time since he could moonwalk, he no longer feels alone in his own palace of wonders. The first chords of Jam detonate under the roof of Munich's Olympiastadion, and 80,000 fists slam the midnight air as if trying to punch holes for angels to fly through. Floodlights lash the mist. Cranes hoist banks of speakers like glowing leviathans. At center stage, Michael Jackson darts between pyrotechnic fountains, silhouette flashing, black fedora, white tape, red sash, an exclamation mark scribbled by lightning. Yet even inside this seismic joy, he feels time dripping through an unseen hourglass. Every leap bruises a knee that has landed on too many steel risers. Every gulp of smoke-laced oxygen reminds him how thin the line is between breath and burnout. The dangerous tour has circled the globe twice, and each night seems to demand not just performance, but transfiguration. 2 hours later, he is airborne again, this time in a C-141 cargo jet, lent by the Royal Jordanian Air Force because commercial schedules could not keep pace with his itinerary. He sits cross-legged on the stretcher bunk, still slick with stage sweat, knees wrapped in ice packs that crinkle like autumn leaves. The cabin hums, a mechanical lullaby. Across from him, cardboard boxes stamped humanitarian aid are strapped in cargo nets. Antibiotics, baby formula, blankets bound for Bucharest orphanages. The reporters who will swarm tomorrow's press conference will never see these crates. They will ask about gross receipts and glove insurance. Michael traces a finger over the word human until the ink smears on his glove. Romania greets him with iron clouds and sirens. Police outriders form a spearhead through Soviet-wide boulevards, blue lights flashing against gray concrete. At Spitalul Clinic de Copii, the director ushers him into a ward where cribs rust at the corners. The ammonia sting in the air nearly chokes him. A little boy named Andrei, no older than 4, chest rattling like a broken accordion, lifts a splintered wooden cross from beneath his blanket. He presses it into Michael's palm, whispering in halting English, "For you, Chevaban, good soul." The cross is crude, bark still clinging, but the gift hits harder than any platinum plaque. Michael's throat knots. He kneels until they are eye level. "Thank you," he breathes, and it feels like liturgy. That night in the Intercontinental Suite, he cannot sleep. City sirens wail beyond the curtain, answering stray dogs howling at winter stars. Michael lays the cross on the nightstand beside a Russian-language Gideon Bible, then drops to his knees on the carpet. Words spill, not the tidy phrases he grew up reciting, but raw fragments. "If you still want me, show me. I am drowning in noise." His voice cracks. The room remains silent except for the radiator clicking like distant applause. 3 days later, he sits opposite Oprah Winfrey in the greenhouse of Neverland's train station, windows fogged by February drizzle. Cameras the size of washing machines peer through ferns. Red tally lights blink like fireflies. Oprah asks about vitiligo, about loneliness, about rumors he sleeps in oxygen chambers. Michael disciplines his tremor into stillness, answers gently, honesty blooming where caution once grew. When she asks whether he is happy, he hesitates, then says, "I'm most alive when I'm giving." The producer signals break. Technicians scuttle. Michael drifts toward the ostrich pen outside, drizzle speckling his jacket. He wonders whether Confession, broadcast to 90 million viewers, can ever refill the private well where courage is drawn. Summer 1993, Bangkok. The monsoon steam turns stadium concrete into a giant wet lung. 2 songs into the set, Michael feels the stage tilting, legs wobbling like rubber. A medic's flashlight dilates his pupils. The verdict is dehydration and exhaustion. Headlines the next day choose another diagnosis. Jackson in prescription spiral. Pop emperor crumbles. Back on the charter, he counts intravenous drips, each drip a liquid second. He opens his journal and writes 1 sentence. Pun is the tax on wonder. He underlines it twice, then sketches a small empty cross. Weeks later, the first allegation breaks. A whisper at first, then a siren. Lawyers speak of settlements, managers of optics, fans of betrayal. Michael hears none of it clearly, only the rising oceanic roar of public hunger. The same crowd that once devoured triumph now licking its lips for crucifixion. Neverland, once sanctuary, feels like a theater of siege. Paparazzi crouch in oleander hedges. Helicopters hover low enough to rattle chandeliers. He walks the moonlit midway alone. Calliope switched off. Roller coaster silent as a skeleton. At the carousel, he rests a hand on a frozen wooden Pegasus, forehead against its wing. "They don't see the children," he whispers, voice too hoarse for even the nearby meerkats to stir. And still, the giving continues. Quiet convoys leave the ranch at dawn, medical supplies to Sarajevo, toys to Sao Paulo favelas, a mobile clinic funded in Addis Ababa. No press releases accompany them. Only accountants know the sums, and even they cannot tally the letters from mothers who found antibiotics waiting when all hope had fled. In these moments, Michael senses the faintest echo of the Nazarene feeding crowds with fish and bread. Miracles that never made the parchment of PR. November 1994, New York. An elevator lurches upward in 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Fluorescent lights flickering like faulty halos. Michael stands alone, black surgical mask hiding the gauntness fame has carved. He clutches Andre's wooden cross in one gloved hand, thumb rubbing the bark smooth. Upstairs, producers debate segment sponsors. Downstairs, Legion fan clubs chant. Michael closes his eyes, feels the elevator cables hum, imagines they are harp strings pulling him into some celestial courtroom. He whispers, "Just a sign you're still near." And the doors slide open on cue. The sign does not come in thunder. It arrives 2 months later, backstage at NBC Studios, in the shape of a 10-year-old girl who asks, without guile, why he believes. The question pierces every layer of armor he has soldered since Munich, since Bucharest, since the first witness meeting. Around them, the world is still roaring, tabloids howling, lawsuits snapping. But in the hush of that dressing room, he hears only the small, brave heartbeat of curiosity. And in that pulse, he detects an ancient rhythm, the same that guided shepherds by starlight and steadied a carpenter's steps toward Calvary. He draws one breath, then another, the battered cross warm against his palm. The words he releases are not press statements or lyrics polished for chart domination. They are watershed syllables, mapping a journey from doctrinal cages to wide-open trust. As he speaks, the studio's sodium lights dim outside the door, crews powering down for the night. But inside the small room, the atmosphere brightens as though someone has cracked a window onto dawn. Far away, Neverland's carousel sits quiet, yet a janitor passing under its awning could swear he hears faint music stirring, an anticipatory chord, the first hint of a long-awaited reprise. And while the city's midnight traffic rifles pass the lot, Michael discovers that an answer to the girl's question is answering him back. A presence steady as a drumbeat, whispering that love outlives scandal, that generosity outruns rumor, that no cross, be it wooden toy or Roman stake, ever remains an ending when resurrection is always rehearsing its entrance just off stage. Silence follows him out of the dressing room, clinging like smoke long after the cameras cool. He leaves the studio through a service exit, breath frosting the midnight air of Burbank, and climbs into an unmarked van that threads side streets until the freeways open. From the back seat, he watches Los Angeles slide past, billboards, sodium pools of convenience store light, graffiti that glitters where spray paint hasn't yet dried. The girl's question, "Why do you believe?" still reverberates, but another noise already competes with it. The rust-iron grind of accusation, louder now that morning papers are rolling off the presses. Tomorrow's headlines will not mention faith. They will recycle rumors, stoke doubt, feed a public appetite that seems bottomless. By the time the van gates swing at Neverland, dawn has silvered the hills, and Michael can no longer tell the difference between exhaustion and prayer. Inside the main house, he walks barefoot across marble so cold it numbs thought. Mirrors line the hallway. Each reflection startles him. Even without makeup, his face looks like a mask he forgot to remove. In the music room, he opens a grand piano, but does not press a key. Instead, he lays his palms on the lacquered lid, drops his forehead to the wood, and lets gravity pull tears he can't afford in daylight. When the sobs subside, He tears a sheet from the leather notebook he keeps for melodies and begins writing words that feel neither lyric nor poem. The first line, "I was wandering in the rain." Ink blots tremble where his hands shake. By sunrise, a skeletal prayer stands on the page, angry, ashamed, asking why thunder speaks louder than innocence. He does not title it. The refrain, "How does it feel?" will wait for Moscow's streets months later. History Tour, Rotterdam, May '96. Arena reverberates with screams, but side stage the monitors show a delay feed. His own face 20 foot tall, every bead of sweat magnified like dew on a giant statue. The sight tilts the world. Drums pound, heart goes arrhythmic. The choreographer counts him in, but his knees lock. Stage manager whispers, 40 seconds. Michael inhales. The air seems to thin. 30 seconds. White noise floods his ears. 20. He steps back into shadow, chest rattling as though bees swarm beneath his sternum. 10. He shakes his head. Lights explode without him. Security hustles him into a corridor smelling of diesel and plastic cables. He presses his spine to cinder block, gulping air that won't stay. An armed guard, ex-Marine, blocks view from roadies. Michael's whisper scrapes out, "They crucified me without nails. No proof. Did Jesus feel this?" No answer comes except the echo of forklift beeps in the loading bay. When the panic finally loosens its grip, he asks for a phone. Back in the hotel, he dials a number he has memorized since childhood. Brother Samuel, former Bible teacher, answers from a Detroit living room crowded with grandchildren's toys. Michael's voice cracks. "Why is God silent when the whole world screams?" Samuel pauses, chair creaking. "Silence," he says, "can be the loudest shield. Swords can't pierce what they cannot hear." The line goes quiet again, but the sentence settles inside Michael like a stone that keeps a door from slamming. 3 weeks later, Neverland Studio. Rain lashes the windows, drumming a military cadence on the panes. Michael cues the engineer, then layers moans and choir passages over a string arrangement already weeping. The working title on the reel, Earth Song Requiem. Technicians assume it's a protest for forests and elephants. Only Michael knows the cracked riverbeds are metaphors for trust drained dry, the wounded planet a mirror of his scorched hope. Mid-take, his voice catches on a sob. He leaves it in the mix. Let the world hear the fracture. When the session ends, he doesn't remove the headphones. He sits on the floor amid coils of cable, arms wrapped around shins, listening to the playback loop. In the next room, musicians joke over pizza. Here he counts each breath. 4 beats in, 4 beats out. The rhythm therapists taught to stave off another attack. He mouths the job verse he read at 3 a.m. "Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." The paradox tastes of iron, but the words keep the walls from closing. September 1996, New York. Midtown Hotel Suite. Curtains drawn against paparazzi strobes. Michael places a demo cassette into a Walkman, presses play. A lullaby drifts. Music box intro, child's hum, then a whispered story about little Susie, forgotten girl on a staircase. No one hearing her cry. The song is eerie, almost macabre. Executives will beg him to drop it from the album. He listens, eyes closed, picturing a candle guttering in an abandoned flat, the flame bending like a plea. When the choir enters, he sees not stadium crowds, but a single grave topped by unmarked snow. He wrote the piece after a night of kneeling on hardwood until his knees bled asking why some children vanish unheard. The song offers no answer, only witness. He rewinds, slips cassette and notebook into a fireproof lockbox already stacked with journals labeled prayers in trembling ballpoint. Another notebook lies open on the coffee table, the Book of Job, margins dense with blue ink. Next to chapters on boils and betrayal, he has scribbled melodies, counterpoint to lament. Verse 31 bears a star. The words of Job are ended. Beneath, his note. But the song continues. Final North American show, Honolulu, December 1996. After the encore, the crowd chants his name while he retreats to a dressing room no bigger than a freight elevator. Fluorescent bulbs buzz. Mirrors are fogged with sweat and CO2. The room reeks of pyro residue. He peels the rhinestone arm brace, then the prosthetic smile. Mascara smears beneath his eyes like war paint washed mid-battle. He crouches, back against a flight case, knees up, forehead on trembling fists. The roar through cinder block sounds distant, tidal. When it fades, a hush arrives so total he can hear the fabric of his jacket drying. He stretches an arm to the vanity and drags down another Gideon Bible. Pages fall open to Job 38. The voice from the whirlwind interrogating human presumption. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Michael mouths the question, half accusation, half embrace. Tears drop onto the onion skin. The ink does not bleed. Somebody knocks. Tour accountant, probably. But he doesn't answer. He pulls a Sharpie from his boot and writes 4 words on the dressing room wall behind the trunk, where no one will see until loadout. Pain is still prayer. Caps the pen, stands, breathes. Somewhere beyond the corridor, crates bang, buses idle. The carnival packs up for another continent. Here, in fluorescent twilight, the performer straightens, wipes mascara streaks with the back of a glove, and whispers to the empty room a vow the tabloids will never quote. I remain. The syllables float, soft as dusk, yet they steady him more than applause ever could. Wind lashes the fuselage all the way across the Atlantic, but the hum of the Gulfstream's engines cannot drown the echo of the vow he spoke into fluorescent stillness. I remain. He repeats it under his breath as the jet slips beneath a gauze-gray dawn and banks toward Le Bourget. Paris appears below like a spilled jewelry box. Warm lights in crooked streets. The Seine a tarnished chain. He should feel romantic arrival. Instead, every cobblestone looks like judgment disguised as charm. The record label has booked the entire mezzanine of the Hotel Raphael. Yet Michael chooses the attic servant's stairwell to reach his suite, favoring wood that creaks honestly over marble that lies about its strength. Inside the room, thick drapes block paparazzi lenses, but he keeps one panel cracked, so a single shaft of January sun stripes the carpet. Dust motes drift through it like microscopic lanterns. He sits at a writing desk scarred by decades of forgotten guests, opens a plain composition book, and writes the date only in his head. The page receives a question instead of a title. If silence protects, what does music do? He waits for an answer, pen hovering, but the hotel's throat-clearing hush offers none. After 10 minutes, he sketches a treble clef in the margin, closes the notebook, and slides it into the lining of a battered suitcase that bodyguards never touch. That night, the label expects him at a private supper on the Ile Saint-Louis. Instead, he slips from the service entrance in a wool coat 2 sizes too large and follows the Seine east on foot, collar up, mask in pocket, but unnecessary. Parisians barely glance at solitary silhouettes after dark. A street guitarist near Pont Marie coaxes La Vie en Rose from a beat-up archtop. Michael lingers just long enough to drop a folded 100-franc note into the case and catch the man's grateful nod. The tune's slow, aching vibrato follows him down the quay, braiding with the hum of traffic until both fade beneath cathedral bells tolling 11. 2 days later, a discreet sedan crosses the Austrian border before sunrise, carrying him and a single aide toward Vienna. Snow feathers the shoulders of pine trees. The Danube slides black and silent beyond the highway guardrail. Michael watches the river and thinks of every verse in Scripture that mentions water. Floods that judge, wells that heal, seas that part for escape. At the city's edge, the driver turns onto lanes too narrow for tour buses and stops beside St. Rupert's, a Romanesque chapel dwarfed by modern facades. Its stone walls glisten with meltwater, the steeple no taller than most Paris lampposts, but something in its modesty whispers safety. They enter through a utility door left unlocked for the organ tuner. Incense from morning mass still lingers, mingling with damp limestone and candle wax. No ushers, no velvet ropes, only the nave breathing cold air that smells like yesterday's snowfall. Michael removes his gloves, fingertips tingling, and lets them trail along a pew polished by centuries of knees. Stained glass saints gaze down, their blues and crimsons muted by winter cloud. Even muted, they feel alive in ways neon never does. The first organ chord rolls out, a technician testing pipes in the loft, unaware of his audience. The low C vibrates through Michael's sternum, a physical mercy that neither judges nor begs applause. He sits, eyes closing, palms open on his thighs. Music swells, slow scales, careful tremolos, and the building seems to expand, each stone absorbing grief, then returning it transfigured. Tears come without permission. He lets them fall on the sleeve of his coat. Footsteps approach, rubber soles on ancient tile, and stop beside him. A middle-aged priest in maintenance overalls, keys jangling at his belt, nods a cordial greeting, clearly failing to recognize the man beneath knit cap and travel fatigue. "Cold morning for reflection," the priest says in accented English. "Morning's never cold when you can feel something," Michael replies, voice rough. The priest sits a respectful distance away. Silence stretches, companionable. At length, Michael asks, "Can someone be a believer if he isn't sure what he believes anymore?" The priest folds his hands, as though warming them at an unseen fire. "Faith is not certainty," he answers after a while. "It's motion, step after step toward what calls you, even if you can't name it." He rises, offers a small bow, and continues down the aisle to resume his duties, leaving Michael with a sentence that feels like a key slipped into his coat pocket. Hours later, back at the Hotel Imperial, a stack of forwarded mail waits. Amid invoices and magazine proofs lies a padded envelope stamped Santiago de Chile. Inside, a child's crayon drawing. Jesus, barefoot in dusty streets, holding Michael's gloved hand. Overhead, in Spanish block letters wobbly with earnestness, "No tengas miedo." Don't be afraid. No signature. Just the date and a smear where the artist's thumb slid through blue sky wax. Michael turns the page over, half expecting a manager's prank, but the reverse is blank. He props the picture against a bedside lamp and studies it until city lights flicker on beyond the window, each yellow dot a word he'll never have strength to speak. That night, he begins a new notebook, smaller than the composition book, bound in red leather soft as well-worn stage shoes. No dates, only fragments. Love has no entourage. Organ pipes don't care who's listening. Why should I? If God moves toward me, one step for every step I take. The distance halves forever, but never vanishes. Maybe that's why longing matters. He writes until dawn, paints the ceiling the color of unplayed violin maple. Then he stands, stretches, and catches himself in the wardrobe mirror. Hair tousled, eyes rimmed red, cheeks unmasked by powder. The face is older than he feels, younger than tabloids claim. To this reflection he speaks softly, ensuring only glass hears. I'm no hero, but I'm no demon. The words do not echo. They root. Back at Neverland, weeks later, he walks the edge of the lake at twilight. Notebook tucked inside a hoodie pocket. Peacocks pick through brittle grass. A distant carousel light sputters to life for evening maintenance. He pauses beneath a eucalyptus, whose peeling bark resembles parchment, and presses a fresh page against the trunk for support. Tonight the silence is not empty. It is pregnant. I serve it by listening. Leaves rustle overhead like gentle applause. Somewhere beyond the fence, a news chopper beats the air, hunting a shot worth selling. He slips the notebook away and turns toward the lights of the main house. Each step deliberate. Monk slow. Faith, he has learned, is not sanctuary from weather. It is choosing to walk when visibility fails, holding a child's drawing in one hand and invisible hand of someone else in the other. The path crunches under his boots. Somewhere in the dark, a piano waits. The first note he coaxes from the Steinway arrives as a whisper so thin the room seems to inhale with it. Candle flame lamplight shivers across ivory. Dust motes bob in thermal spirals. Michael holds the key down, letting the string hum into hush. And somewhere between vibration and silence, he hears a shape, less melody than murmur, like breath against an ear. He adds a minor third, then a suspended fourth, chords stacked deliberately sparse, so every tone carries lonely weight. The music is almost nothing, yet it fills the vaulted sitting room more deeply than any full arrangement he has scored in years. When the phrase resolves, he lifts his hands and sits motionless, allowing the last molecule of sound to die. Outside, a train horn drifts across the valley. A single plaintive syllable that suits the moment too perfectly to feel accidental. He reaches for the red notebook, writes one fragment. Where thunder ends, love still whispers. No title. Not yet. 3 weeks later, the Gulf Stream drops below low cloud and levels out over Johannesburg. The horizon looks poured from molten brass. The late September sun exaggerating every rust seam in the corrugated rooftops. As the jet taxis, heat ripples blur the painted chevrons on the tarmac, giving the illusion of liquid runway. Michael steps onto the stair, dry wind slapping his cheeks with furnace breath. An airport choir breaks into improvised harmony, Zulu cadences threaded with gospel claps. He lowers his mask, wanting their first glimpse of him to be bare, and bows so deeply the brim of his fedora touches knee. The choir's final chord modulates up, startlingly triumphant, and for a moment he feels lifted, as if the scale itself were a set of invisible hands. Later, in the presidential residence at Houghton Estate, he waits in a garden lined with cicadas older than civil calendars. Cicadas quiver in the branches. Nelson Mandela approaches without entourage, walking cane-tapping ancestral rhythm on stone path. He sits beside Michael on a weathered teak bench, palms resting over the handle of his cane as though it were a shepherd's staff. Close up, the former prisoner's eyes are not soft, exactly. Steel still glints beneath, but they glow with something fiercer than gentleness. Deliberate peace. They speak first of the charity concert, how proceeds will outfit children's hospitals from Cape Town to Cairo, but conversation soon drifts. Mandela asks, in a tone as casual as discussing rainfall, "Where does your heart find rest?" Michael studies the grooves in the elder's knuckles, imagines each line a year on Robben Island. "Some days," he answers, "it feels as though Rest and I wrote different addresses on the envelope." Mandela chuckles, leans back. Letters arrive eventually, even when the post is slow. Then, more quietly, "Forgiveness speeds the mail." Michael's breath catches. Is forgiving the same as forgetting? No, Mandela says, gaze fixed on a sunbird sipping hibiscus nectar. Forgiveness is memory without chains. It is a decision the strong make so they may walk without dragging the past behind them. The garden goes silent, except for the tiny bird's wings, a blur of emerald and gold. Michael nods, yet the idea lands heavy. Strength, lately, has felt like soil after drought. Cracked, brittle, hollow beneath the crust. Concert night in Cape Town, Greenpoint Stadium. Michael stands on a hydraulic lift beneath the stage, heart synced to sub-bass throb leaking through the steel deck. 65,000 glow sticks sway like a floating prairie of fireflies. The lift jolts, rises. Light detonates. The crowd's roar surges tidal. For 2 charged hours, the air is an electrical storm of choruses, lasers, fireworks, and sweat. He finishes with "Heal the World," thousands of South African voices layering over the refrain until it sounds less like pop anthem and more like a field chant seeded with hope. Backstage, still panting, he is escorted to a children's hospice 15 minutes from the stadium. Fluorescent corridors smell of antiseptic and lavender sachets. Volunteers tuck into pillow corners. In Ward C, a boy named Themba lies curled like a comma, tethered to oxygen. Michael kneels at bedside, glove off, and traces a finger along the child's wrist where the pulse flutters insect fragile. Themba smiles, whispers in halting English, "I'm happy. You touched me. Now God sees me." The words puncture every layer of armor. Michael's forehead drops to the rail. A tear lands on the boy's hospital bracelet and shines like a gemstone in harsh light. He leaves the ward with pockets full of crayon sketches and a silence ringing louder than any stadium ovation. October dusk, Neverland. Law firm sedans line the drive like blunt-nosed vultures. In the Foundation's main office, boxes of shredded paperwork sit like snowdrifts beneath fluorescent glare. A forensic accountant finishes his briefing. A once-trusted partner siphoned millions from Heal the World, financing personal real estate ventures. The betrayal feels surgical, precise enough to spare organs, but sever arteries. Michael dismisses the team and stands alone amid overturned file trays. On a shelf, he spots a stuffed koala, its fur grayed by years of sunlight. A tag still dangles. To Michael, thank you for saving my sister's life, 1993. He squeezes the toy once, gently, as if checking for a heartbeat, then sets it atop a stack of legal binders. The gesture is both benediction and goodbye. Next morning, a press release will announce the Foundation's dissolution. No litigation, no spectacle, just a closure, the kind surgeons perform when bleeding cannot be staunched. That night, he wanders the lawn under Orion's tilted hourglass, trying to pray, but finding only static. Wind rattles eucalyptus leaves like rusted tambourines. In the studio, he powers up a DAT recorder, positions one microphone in the center of the empty tracking room, and sits on the floor, knees drawn up. He hits record, No instruments, no slate. 30 seconds pass. HVAC. Hum. Distant peacock shriek. His own breathing. Then softly, almost imperceptibly, he begins to sing. A lullaby in falsetto. Syllables without language. Note sustained until it quivers on the edge of breaking. Between phrases, he lets long spans of hush stretch, framing sound the way cathedral arches frame light. The entire performance lasts 7 minutes. He rewinds, listens through studio monitors. The silence inside the track feels muscular, alive, as though inhabited by someone listening back. He labels the tape in block letters. In the silence, keep private. Slips it into the identical fireproof box, now half filled with notebooks. Locks it. Breathes. Winter rains return to California. Children's letters pour through the main gate like snowflakes. No fence can stop. Illustrations, testimonies, prayer cards. One envelope from a Kentucky mother encloses a photocopied verse. I was sick, and you visited me. Underneath she scrawls, you did this for my Cody. Thank you for being the hands of Jesus when ours were trembling. He pins the note beside the Chilean drawing on his bedroom wall. Constellations of gratitude papering plaster. Weeks pass. Lawsuits spawn, fade, mutate. Tabloid satellites keep rotating. Yet some evenings, when the news chopper finally veers off and the midway lights dim, he enters the empty Heal the World headquarters with a custodian's key. Dust-filmed screens. Marketing posters curl at the corners. He walks aisle to aisle, fingertips grazing chairbacks, humming the wordless melody from the DAT. Near the window, he pauses by a fish tank long since drained, glass cloudy with mineral ghosts. His reflection stares back, a man partly in shadow, partly lit by moon. He whispers into the hollow room, I forgive you. Whether the statement is for the embezzler, the tabloids, the audience that once crowned him, or the mirror facing him, he cannot say. Perhaps all of them. Perhaps self-pardon is just another verse in the same unfinished hymn. He sets the koala inside the tank, a sentinel of plush against the void, and switches off the lights. The door clicks shut behind him. Night air greets him crisp, perfumed with sage. Somewhere up the hill, the red notebook waits on a piano bench, pages fluttering in draft like wings testing readiness. He climbs the path slowly. Mandela's words thudding in step with heartbeat. Memory without chains. Past the carousel, peacocks stir in their roosts. Above, Orion still swings his belt of fire, but the hunter seems less ominous tonight. A reminder that constellations persist beyond any cloud of rumor. Michael reaches the porch, hand on the knob, and in the quiet before entering, he thinks he hears a familiar chord from the empty studio. A single note held, then another, as though the silence itself has begun to play back what it learned in the dark. The night's last cricket fades as the studio monitors click off, leaving a single unanswered chord hovering in Michael's mind, like an illuminated question mark. He carries that ghost note onto the jet, bound for New York, humming it under his breath while sunrise goldens the Pacific, and then the plains. By the time the plane descends toward JFK, the hum has become a heartbeat he cannot quiet. September 7th, 2001. Midtown traffic snarls around Madison Square Garden, where forklifts offload crates stamped MJ30T. Inside the arena, riggers weld catwalks that sparkle blue-white in the arc of acetylene, and 60 projectors test fire galaxies onto a cyclorama big enough to swallow Broadway. Michael stands alone in the nosebleed seats, hoodie up, gauging sight lines the way a builder checks plumb. Every so often he closes his eyes and memorizes the echo length, 2.4 seconds from snare to final reverberation. A cathedral of pop, ready to be filled with hallelujahs of its own kind. Yet even here, accomplishment feels provisional, as though the roof might collapse under the weight of unspoken expectation. Rehearsals stretch past midnight. Musicians pin down key changes for a dangerous, black or white medley. Dancers argue over an eighth count delay that could make or break the magic circle of the moonwalk. Between takes, Michael retreats beneath the stage, paging through a pocket New Testament that still smells faintly of eucalyptus oil from Neverland. He stops at the story of Lazarus, stone rolled away, grave stench eclipsed by breath returning. The verse is underlined from years earlier. Tonight it pulses as if ink were still wet. He plans to stay in Manhattan through the second concert on September 10th, but a nervous system flicker, intuition perhaps, tells him to leave early. After the curtain falls that night, he slips out the Ziegfeld-style exit, coat collar high, and boards a charter to California before dawn has a chance to break. 14 hours later, a steward wakes him somewhere over the Mojave. Tower chatter crackles through headphones, planes weaponized, towers falling. Michael pictures the skyline where he stood 2 nights before, lights winking like terrestrial stars. His first thought is not of cancelled marketing blitzes or ticket refunds. It is of the riggers he joked with about the Yankees, the makeup artist who loaned him lip balm. He closes his eyes and prays without language, only the chord that's shadowed him since Neverland, now vibrating inside his ribs like a struck bell. Back at Neverland, he orders the gates shut and every ride powered down. News footage flickers non-stop on a single television in the library. The rest of the mansion remains dark. He watches, motionless, as gray plumes bloom where glass and steel once climbed, feels his pulse slowing until it matches the silent fall of paper drifting through lower Manhattan air. A blizzard made of meeting notes and grocery receipts. At 3 a.m., he switches off the set, lighting one brass lamp so small its glow doesn't reach the ceiling. The hush is absolute, yet heavy, like snow before it avalanches. Unable to sleep, he rings a Swiss artisan whose silverwork he admires. The call wakes the craftsman, but Michael apologizes only once. "I need a crucifix," he whispers, voice raw as gravel. "Hand-wrought, no jewels, just scars." He faxes neck measurements and wiring diagrams for a clasp that will never slip. The pendant must hang directly over his heart, unseen beneath stage silk, weight enough to remind but not restrict breath. The smith promises delivery within the month. Michael thanks him and hangs up without saying goodbye. That dawn, he walks the central avenue of rides. Ferris wheel frozen, carousel mirrors reflecting a sky now the color of gunmetal. At the Midway's far end, he unlocks the gates, steps into the parking lane where a single SUV idles. 2 bodyguards flank him as they drive south to Santa Barbara Airport, then east on the earliest private charter clearance the FAA will allow. He carries no entourage, only a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in brown paper and the red leather notebook tucked inside his jacket. The jet lands at Teterboro under military escort. Manhattan smells acrid even here. Burned plastic, gypsum, something metallic that turns taste to pennies. Wearing a charcoal respirator and a plain windbreaker, he rides an unmarked van to a checkpoint 15 blocks from Ground Zero, flashes a laminated humanitarian badge, walks the rest. Dust cakes every surface. Helmets, boots. the wings of stilled construction cranes. Rescuers move like ghosts inside a snow globe that someone keeps shaking. Michael sets the lilies against a half-melted traffic light pole, removes one glove, and traces a cross in the ash. No cameras catch the gesture. Only a firefighter nearby notices, nods, and returns to sifting rubble for anything that can still beat. He does not stay long. Sirens wail, steel groans, and a tremor shivers through the mountain of debris. The ground itself feels unsure of its bones. Back in the van, he slips the respirator down, mouth tasting of concrete dust, and writes in the notebook with a borrowed carpenter's pencil. He wasn't in the temple. He was where it hurts. I want to be there too. In the weeks that follow, he refuses every PR request. No televised benefit speeches, no red carpet vigils. His philanthropy team transfers funds quietly to union relief coffers and first responders' trauma units. Reporters get wind of none of it. What they do glean is rumor of new songs, unfinished sketches tracked after midnight in the Neverland studio, titles scribbled on reel boxes: Phoenix, Ashes in the Air, Kyrie 11. The pieces share a peculiar architecture, verses spare as prayer beads, bridges that dissolve into long rests rather than crescendo. In one, a choir sings only vowels, as though language itself burned away and left pure breath behind. During an off-the-record interview with a London journalist researching humanitarian art, conversation drifts. The reporter, voice wavering, asks what Michael feels in this altered world. Recorders off, Michael folds hands, eyes damp, and answers, "I feel Christ, near." A pause heavy as incense. Then, so quietly the pens cannot catch it, he adds, "Please don't print that. Let it stay a candle, not a spotlight." The tape never leaks. October brings the silver cross. Matte finish, tool marks visible, Christ's arms wide, not in agony, but welcome. Michael threads it onto a slender chain, slips it beneath his collar, and exhales as though a weight has been lifted by being added. That night he kneels at the piano, lid closed, hands resting on wood cool as river stone. He opens the red notebook to a fresh page and writes only a chord progression in block letters: C minor, a major 7, F minor. Below it, a single lyric seed. Even ashes know the pattern of wings. The lamp on the piano casts a circle just large enough to hold him, the keys, and the cross that beats gently against his chest. Outside, the midway remains dark, but somewhere in the valley an owl calls 3 times, a low, deliberate benediction. Michael answers with the softest pressure on middle C, letting the tone float upward like a prayer released into night too wounded for words, yet somehow, not yet, beyond the possibility of song. Steam curls above the coffee mug, lingering a second before fading into the rafters, as though even vapor hesitates to occupy the silence that has overtaken Neverland. Dawn has barely tinted the valley, but Michael is already dressed. White t-shirt, gray sweatpants, no glove, no guard, no soundtrack. Sitting at the head of a 12-seat table he rarely fills. The only other presence is today's Los Angeles Journal, folded to a headline that roars in billboard capitals: "Demon in a Glove." Beneath it, a tabloid photo frames his smile in red circles, as if evidence of wrongdoing hides behind enamel. He does not read the article. The chorus of pundits is memorized by now. Instead, he watches morning light creep across oak floorboards and listens to an old grandfather clock mark seconds too loudly. Outside, peacocks scream their metallic cry, but the estate feels smaller than ever. 50 acres that cannot muffle accusation. Invincible has been out for 3 months. In theory, it's a triumph. #1 debuts on 5 continents, Royal Suite reviews from Rolling Stone. In practice, the album floats like a parade balloon whose handlers have let go. The world gawks for a moment, then turns to chase the next carnival float. Michael shrugs at the figures. He pours profits into burn units and orphanages, the way farmers seed next season's field. Yet today, he senses fatigue in his marrow, a shimmer at the edge of panic. What if compassion is no longer enough to drown the noise? The phone rings at 7:14 a.m. It is Grace, the nanny, breathless. CNN is running letters, your private letters. Within minutes, he is in the screening room, televisions tiled wall to wall. A presenter wields photocopied stationery like courtroom exhibits. Handwriting unmistakable. Children trust me. I must protect their wonder. That is my calling. The anchor's eyebrow arches in mock concern. Panelists trade insinuations about obsession. Michael's skin prickles. Those pages came from a locked drawer. From someone I fed and paid. Betrayal splits him like sudden flame. He orders the monitors off, but the brand remains under his ribs. 2 hours later, cameras gather at the ranch gate. For the first time in memory, he does not lower tinted windows and glide by like smoke. He steps from the SUV, jaw set, silver crucifix hidden under cotton. Reporters shove recorders. Questions fire. Why do you write to children at midnight? What are you hiding in that mansion? And something detonates. Voice, raw and unsculpted, breaks free. Love is not a crime, he shouts, arms flaring with dancer's precision, yet without choreography. Your poison doesn't change truth. Flashes erupt. His guard pulls him back inside before the next syllable can scorch, but the damage, or liberation, is done. By evening, footage loops worldwide. Michael Jackson screaming, face contorted, headlines licking their lips. That night, he drives alone to South Los Angeles, to a chalk-gray church that once hosted Mahalia Jackson revival recordings. The parking lot is empty, except for an elder locking up. Inside, the sanctuary smells of worn hymnals and lemon polish. A youth choir rehearses Total Praise, voices climbing rafters like kites caught by friendly wind. Michael slips into the last pew, hood up. Notes swirl around him. Sopranos bright, tenors earth-warm. And for 4 minutes, he remembers why music exists, to hallow breath. Rehearsal ends. While folding robes, the choir director, a bespectacled pastor younger than Thriller, notices the solitary figure. He approaches, unstartled. Michael rises, head bowed. They despise me for kindness, he says without greeting. But I would rather stay with Christ than march with their crowd. The pastor studies him, then smiles as if the answer is obvious. Crowds cheered the Palms on Sunday and shouted, "Crucify," by Friday. The Savior kept walking anyway. He reaches into a pocket, hands Michael a bookmark printed with the Beatitudes. No sermon, no autograph request. Michael returns to Neverland past midnight. Room dark, only moonlight through French doors. He opens his red notebook, now frayed along the spine, and copies the sermon on the Mount Longhand, each verse deliberate, the act becoming lullaby. When he finishes, he presses the paper to his chest, whispers, "Blessed are the pure in heart," then places the sheet beneath his pillow, a new ritual stitched into the fabric of sleep. Weeks stretch. Accusations multiply like cells in petri dish. A morning radio host plays clips of his outburst between canned laughter. Paparazzi drones hum beyond tree lines. One evening, Catherine phones from Encino. Her voice is the gospel record that first taught him harmony. "Michael, I do, Mother," he answers, pacing the billiard room where no game has been played in years. "But not to survive. I pray not to grow bitter." His hand finds the crucifix, cool reassurance near frantic heartbeat. "Anger can carry you or bury you," she says. "Choose carriage." After the call, he walks the torch-lit path to the zoo paddocks. A giraffe leans over the fence, breath sweet with hay. Michael strokes its cheek, and the animal's steady gaze steadies him in return. Stars wheel overhead. Headlines cannot reach this altitude. He closes his eyes and recites aloud, voice low, the words he now sleeps by. "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake." May 2003. A production assistant for a British documentary sets up cameras in Neverland's living room, coaxing Michael to discuss childlike wonder. He obliges, unaware that editing scissors will carve nuance into caricature. Months later, the program airs. Overnight, phones convulse. Lawyers, agents, siblings. The term monstrous trends before dawn. He watches the broadcast once, expression unreadable. When it ends, he walks to the music cottage, lowers needle onto an old vinyl of Samuel Barber's Adagio. Strings weep cathedrals. He sits on hardwood, back against wall, and allows tears to gather, but not fall. In that stillness he senses a presence, familiar as breath during prayer. Without opening his eyes, he murmurs, "You see, don't you?" The silence replies with peace thick enough to touch. At sunrise, he takes the finished sheet music of Ashes in the Air, only chord charts and rests, and burns it in a copper bowl by the lake. Not an act of despair, but of obedience. Some songs belong to wind, not market. Ash floats upward, joining fog that drapes hills, and he thinks, perhaps truth sometimes needs no sound at all. The world, however, will insist on noise. Within weeks, subpoenas arrive. Yet when he steps from courthouse limo for the formal indictment, cameras stacked like artillery, protesters chanting, he fingers the little Romanian cross in his pocket and recalls the choir's worship, the pastor's steady gaze, the Mount's quiet wisdom. Photographers capture his face serene, almost luminous, as though lit from inside by something scandal could not stain. And somewhere in the chaos, a voice, his own remembered, whispers back the promise he made on a piano bench years earlier. "I remain." Camera shutters whip the February air like tiny knives as Michael steps from the black Escalade, shoulders squared beneath a wool coat cut darker than courthouse granite. A guard's elbow guides him past barricades where placards clatter against aluminum rails. Some painted with hearts, others with words no hymn would dare rhyme. He feels none of it on his skin. What touches him instead is the polished sliver of wood inside his jacket pocket. A modest crucifix carved by a Romanian boy 12 years earlier. The cross digs gently into his palm. Not painful, just persisting, the way a metronome persists beneath melody. Inside Department 102, fluorescent bulbs buzz like trapped hornets. Oak pews groan under the weight of reporters equipped with lenses so long they resemble artillery. Michael's attorney whispers strategy, jury demographics, objection rhythms, but the words skim across his thoughts without landing. He registers instead the courtroom's scent: old paper, bargain store cologne, photocopier ozone, and a faint undertone of panic, everyone pretends not to exhale. Judge Melville enters. The room stands. Michael breathes. The wooden crucifix presses harder each time his fist closes. When sworn testimony begins, he studies the witness stand as if it were a distant shoreline he might one day reach. Across hours of cross-examination, he barely shifts, except to scrawl bursts of ink onto a notebook no one else may read. The bailiff observes, curious, lines of text separated by blank space, as though each sentence needs room to bow. Lord, steady the small muscles so truth can stand taller than showmanship. If your silence shields, let my silence anchor. Not please exactly, more like thread-reinforcing fabric. Physical decline creeps in subtle firsts. A stutter in gait walking to the restroom. Jacket shoulders suddenly too large. Doctors diagnose chronic insomnia, spinal inflammation, dramatic weight drop. Tito rides with him most mornings. On the highway, they cocoon inside a blacked-out van that glides like a hearse between motel-strip diners and fog-veiled vineyards. One hazed dawn, prosecution has signaled a motion for remand. Worst-case talk of immediate jail. En route, Michael plays a CD on the vehicle's tinny speakers. Schubert's Ave Maria, not the famed version, but a modest choral take recorded in a Dublin church. Strings enter, fragile as breath in cold glass. Michael rests his forehead against chilled window, lips moving in synchrony with Latin he learned phonetically as a child. Ora pro nobis peccatoribus. Tito watches, unable to decide whether the whisper is prayer or private conversation. Mid-phrase, Michael murmurs in English, barely audible, "Father, you've seen. That is enough." Courtroom day 19. Prosecutor Snedden rises, voice cutting sharp arcs through stale air, formally requesting incarceration pending verdict. A murmur rolls across pews. Michael's attorney squeezes his forearm beneath the table, but Michael's drift is inward, toward the wooden cross, toward a memory of a choir loft in Vienna, where organ pipes vibrated stone into sympathy. His pen finds paper. I am not asking to win, only to last until the measure ends. Evening collapses into motel anonymity, walls stuccoed in corporate beige, HVAC rattling like distant snare drum. Counsel's suite hosts strategy talk, but a junior associate notices the defendant absent. She finds him alone in a service stairwell, writing under fluorescent hum. Notebook on knee, crucifix balanced across thumb. She clears her throat. He looks up, eyes bright yet unfocused, as if emerging from conversation with someone she cannot see. He closes the book, nods politely, returns to silent assent. May heat invades the valley as closing arguments loom. Paparazzi bloom along the perimeter like desert thistle, feeding on any misstepped syllable. Michael begins each dawn by reading 2 Beatitudes aloud, then the armor of Psalm 27, then sitting in stillness until chauffeur coughs. It's time. Ritual not for victory, but for calibration. Verdict day. Early sun glitters cruelly across courthouse windows, turning them into mirrors. Inside the van, no music. Only engine rumble and the rhythmic click of rosary beads. Grace has slipped into Grace's purse. Michael wears black from collar to cuff, not his costume, an editor's erasure mark across the spectacle. In his pocket, the wooden cross. The gallery swells to standing room, camera shutters pre-clicking like insects. Jury foreman rises, time fissures, not guilty. The words fall soft, almost embarrassed, compared to months of televised fury. Reporters pivot, hunting angle. Spectators gasp or curse. Michael closes eyes, exhales without volume. His attorney murmurs, "We won," but Michael stays seated, palms open on thighs, head bowed as though listening for an echo only he expects. Back in the holding corridor, he leans against cinder block, breath steadying to its own unfamiliar meter. Security urges him toward waiting vehicles, but he lingers, fingertips tracing pocket outline of the cross. No fist pump, no statement. Only a whisper, nearly lost to footstep echo. "This is not mine. None of this is mine." Night falls 3 counties away in a modest hotel guarded more by obscurity than personnel. Windows stay shuttered. Lights remain off. Michael bathes, dresses in loose cotton, and lies on the bedspread without turn down. Moonlight slices through a gap in drapes, illuminating the crucifix on the side table. Hours pass, traffic hush, ice machine groan, distant freight horn, and he does not move. Finally, in darkness so complete it feels 3-dimensional, he speaks into air. "You were here, weren't you?" No voice answers, yet the room seems to warm by one quiet degree. As though acknowledging presence, he smiles, small, tired, undefeated in ways fame cannot chart, then closes his eyes. Wooden cross balanced on sternum, like a metronome set to the tempo of endurance. In the hallway, journalists wait for morning, scripting narratives of triumph or ruin. But inside the unlit room, neither label survives. Only a man, a question answered by stillness, and the first taste of sleep that does not feel like surrender. Wind plows the Gulf Stream's nose through night, as if the sky itself were reluctant to let him leave. 2 sleeping children curl under blankets stitched with cartoon lions, unaware their father has pressed his forehead to the window in a silent benediction to the continent shrinking beneath cloud. California lights flicker into constellations, then ember, then nothing. No entourage this time, only a nanny, 2 stewards who have promised discretion, and a stack of unused first-class crystal. Michael insisted remain boxed. He has nothing left that needs to sparkle. Morning honey glows above the Persian Gulf as the jet lands at Muharraq. Heat rises in transparent columns, warping the horizon so palace domes appear to float. A royal envoy escorts Michael, Prince, Paris, and Blanket past velvet-corded halls into a villa set against water, clear enough to mirror every fear he brought with him. Later, when the call to prayer unfurls across the bay, the minarets seem to inhale and exhale for the entire kingdom. Michael stands barefoot on a balcony where salt crust makes starbursts on the railing's bronze. The muezzin's refrain pours through him, notes unlike gospel, yet vibrating that same inner rung no jury, no camera could ever reach. An imam invites him to visit Al-Fateh Grand Mosque on a Tuesday when tourists are light. No press is told, no cell phone flashes greet him. Marbled corridors cool his soles. The carpet is the color of palm hearts. He listens to verses recited in Arabic he cannot parse, yet the cadence strokes his pulse steady. Standing beside the imam, hands resting on thighs, head bowed, he does not convert. He simply listens. Afterwards they share mint tea in a garden where fountains stitch sunlight into water. Michael fingers the silver cross beneath his linen tunic. "There is something common," he murmurs, "like an underground river feeding many wells." The imam nods, smiling as if at a truth too obvious for argument. That night in the villa courtyard, while the children chase fireflies the size of pepper seeds, Michael opens his red leather notebook. In every faith, a door into love. Maybe the house beyond has no walls at all. Later, Blanket crawls onto his lap, points at the desert's bruised peach dusk, and whispers, "Daddy, where does the sky end?" Michael kisses the child's hair, tastes sweat and sea salt. "Where kindness runs out," he answers, "and that's why we keep pouring more." By autumn, the desert privacy grows thin. Whispers of a comeback tour leak through palace corridors. He declines and boards a commercial flight to Dublin disguised in tweed and silence. A producer friend leases him a stone farmhouse 60 miles west, where hedgerows maze the fields and rain scribbles poetry on slate roofs. There are no bodyguards, just a collie named Finn, who accepts Michael as another quiet animal among sheep. Morning one, he walks the kilometer into Ballygrain to buy soda bread. Mist frets the lane, dampening his hair, smudging the borrowed spectacles on his nose. Inside the bakery, a bell tinkles. Flour perfumes the air. Villagers queue politely. Conversation tuned to radio cricket scores. An elderly woman in a waxed coat studies his face, unhurried. "You've kind eyes, dear," she says, handing him a wrapped loaf extra warm. "God must fancy you." Her brogue lilts like fiddle strings. Michael's reply collapses into a single nod. Tears puddle behind his lids, unseen until he steps into drizzle where they mingle with rain. That evening he lights the hearth and writes by peat smoke glow. The fairy tale begins. Once there was a prince with a crown too heavy for his neck, so he gave it away to heal the sick. Paris sits cross-legged, pencils sketching illustrations of willow trees that bow like courtiers. Prince suggests a dragon that only roars when someone lies. Blanket giggles, adding, "And the prince beats it with songs, not swords." Michael realizes this is the first project in years created for nobody beyond the room's circle of firelight. Across weeks he wanders the pasture at twilight, reciting Psalm 23 in counterpoint with a Gaelic folk song drifting from distant pubs. Prayer here needs no posture, only weather. One dawn he kneels in wet clover. No cameras, no script, and says aloud, "Make me ordinary enough to see miracles again." A skylark erupts from grass, shooting skyward on hysterical wings. The answer feels instantaneous. Winter 2006 sets him in a chalet above Lake Lucerne, snow muffling even the ticking of mantle clocks. Avalanche fences rim the slope. Beyond them, Alps spear moonlight so fiercely the peaks appear haloed. Here lawyers cannot reach in an hour. Gossip columns lag days behind. Children sled until cheeks burn, then pile inside for cocoa while Michael steps into the pines behind the house. No path, just hush where every exhale crystallizes. Under a larch, he unrolls a wool mat and prays facing whichever direction feels like center. No words tonight, only inhalations counted against the whir of his heart. In the breath pockets between, he hears wind comb needles, a sound like distant applause muted by humility. Back at the chalet, he phones his longtime manager, voice steady as candle flame. "I'm not your product anymore," he says. "I don't want to be an icon. I need to be a man raising kids and questions." The other end crackles with panic. Budgets, brand equity, legacy. Michael thanks him, apologizes for the revenue gap, and hangs up. He places the phone beside the notebook, opens to a page titled Common Thread. Under it, 3 columns grow. Bible verses, Quranic surahs, a line from a Celtic blessing. Across the margins, he doodles a broken crown mended with vines. The children peek in. He closes the cover and invites them to weave daisies into Papa's hair. April arrives with thaw. Crocuses spear through snow like tiny prophets of resilience. Michael rises earlier than dawn, slips outside while the kids still dream. The garden, if a clearing of moss and alpine forget-me-nots can claim such a title, glistens under starlight. He stands barefoot until cold stings his arches awake, then raises palms to an invisible choir loft. No choreography, no canned applause, only a pulse inside rib and soil that sinks for 3 heartbeats. He prays, "Let every song I never release nourish whoever needs silence more." Wind answers by threading pine branches together. They sway as if bowing. For once, he bows back. No spotlight required. When the sun climbs, he returns to the kitchen, finds Prince reading The Boy with the Broken Crown draft aloud to Paris, who corrects his pacing like a stern editor. Michael laughs, a sound looser than stage laughter, warm like kettle steam. He butters toast, drizzles local honey, slides plates before them. "Soul food," he declares. They giggle, unaware of any pun. That afternoon, he mails a slim manuscript to a children's hospital in London, unsigned. Inside, the complete fairy tale, bound with twine, margins seeded with doodles, dragons calmed by lullabies, crowns sprouting blossoms where jewels once weighed. A note. For every child who believes love can make monsters quiet. He includes a postage slip for feedback, but expects none. Love, not measured, need not be returned. On the last day of 2007, he journals by window snowfall. "I once feared vanishing from billboards would kill me. Now I see disappearance can be pilgrimage. Perhaps icons must crack, so saints inside men can breathe." Outside, village bells usher midnight. He signs the entry, not MJ nor King, but simply Michael J., Pilgrim Father, beginner again. Then he blows out the candle, folds the pages against his heart, and sleeps without stage fright for the first New Year's Eve he can remember. No confetti, no countdown, only the ordinary mercy of darkness trusting dawn to keep its appointment. Winter rain sluices down a runway at LAX, turning the sodium lamps into molten spears of brass. Michael steps from the jetway in a navy peacoat 3 sizes larger than his frame, collar high enough to hide, or perhaps cradle, his jaw. Heathrow fog still clings to the wool, mixing with Pacific mist, until the fabric smells of both continents, both histories. Customs officers glance at the passport, nod, look away. His name has receded from scandal headlines just long enough to become a slowly healing bruise, noticeable only when pressed. Within 48 hours, he is inside Studio 3 at Center Staging in Burbank, the same hangar-wide room where Beat It footwork once rattled the rafters. Now road cases bear fresh stencil. "This is it. Compassion first." Kenny Ortega paces with a binder of lighting schematics. But before cue lists or pyrotechnic timetables are discussed, Michael asks the dancers to circle up. 30 pairs of sneakers squeak against marley flooring. He removes the silver crucifix from beneath his t-shirt, lets it rest in his palm like a tuning fork. "This will be mercy," he says, voice soft enough to make everyone lean in. "Not fireworks, not ego. If the world gives us 2 hours, we'll give it absolution." A beat of confusion. Some cast members expected the glitter-commanding monarch of pop, but when rehearsal tracks start, the difference is obvious. He trims drum fills, extends rests, allows silence to bloom between chords, so lyrics land like seed rather than spear. Back home in Holmby Hills, the rented mansion is less museum than liminal space. Boxes still sealed, paintings leaning face-in against guest room walls. In a second-floor study, he keeps a cedar box labeled simply, Cares. One February night, he opens it and retrieves a forwarding address scrawled on crumpled stationery. The Romanian boy who once pressed a wooden cross into his hands, now 23, and battling renal failure in Iași. Michael sits at a desk littered with O2 Arena drafts and begins, "Dear brother in hope, I never forgot the day you called me good. Age has taught me I am simply learning to be willing. They may misunderstand willingness, but Christ does not. Remember, blessed are the pure, not the perfect." He ends with a line from the Beatitudes, "Fericiți cei cu inima curată." In fractured Romanian he practiced for hours. The envelope travels via diplomatic pouch. He requests no confirmation. March, early, call at the Forum. Musicians run "They Don't Care About Us" in 12/8 gospel shuffle per Michael's new chart. During a pause, he studies the horn section, notices a trumpeter rubbing arthritic fingers, and quietly changes the key down a half step to spare her. "We'll leave the high notes for heaven," he jokes, grin lighting corners of eyes not seen on MTV since Jam. Crew members trade glances, mercy again, baked into tempo. That afternoon, he hands Kenny a pocket notebook filled with bullet point concepts, projected images of doctors and highways for Man in the Mirror, choir robes ripped away to reveal street clothes, closing blackout held 3 beats longer than standard, so audience leaves in thoughtful hush. At the top, he has penned a thesis in green ink. Forgiveness as firework, explodes quiet, illuminates longer. 3 weeks before departure to London, he drives alone to Encino. Catherine waits on the porch, knitting needles clicking like slow rain. Inside the kitchen, the smell of sweet potato pie is so thick it almost feels choreographed. She touches his cheek, eyes searching. "Michael, are you ready for applause again?" "I'm ready to ask them to love each other." He pauses, swallows. "If I don't make it to the last bow, tell them I wasn't a god, just a man stubborn for kindness." She presses her palm over the crucifix hidden beneath cotton. "Then let the kindness be curtain call." June 24th, Los Angeles steams under an early heat wave. Inside Staples, catwalks shimmer with LED constellations awaiting ignition. Michael runs the full show in street clothes and loafers, body lean but sure. At Earth Song, he halts the band 4 bars before finale. "This is a plea," he announces into the headset. "Not entertainment. When the tree on screen falls, feel it." He closes eyes. Conductor restarts. The whale-sized video oak splinters in slow motion, and Michael's ad-lib, a hushed "What about us?" sounds less accusatory, more confessional. Techs at dimmer boards wipe eyes, startled by their own tenderness. After the final cutoff, house lights stay down. Crew expects notes. Instead, Michael kneels center court, head bowed, arms loose. 30 silent seconds pass, an eternity in production terms, before he whispers, "Thank you, Christ," rises, and simply walks off, handing in-ear monitors to a stunned stagehand. Back at the mansion, he writes one last journal entry, steady despite fatigue grooving beneath eyes. "Love is Christ even when misnamed. If misunderstanding is the price of faithful noise, I will pay." He draws a staff, inks a single whole note. C natural, no key signature. Beneath it, he scripts. One sound contains all others when the heart is tuned. He closes the notebook and tucks it beside the cedar box of letters. In the early hours of June 25th, while aides finalize wardrobe trunks, Michael slips into the rehearsal room adjoining the kitchen. No microphones, no cameras. He places the crucifix on the Yamaha's closed lid, rests fingertips on wood, and exhales until lungs feel new. Words come in the shape of nothing spoken, only awareness. A stillness so dense it seems to tilt the planet a fraction toward mercy. Outside, a truck downshifts on sunset. Inside, a clock ticks like soft tap shoes. He whispers, "Forgive them. Forgive me." Then he pockets the cross, flicks off the lamp, and leaves the room exactly as he found it, except for the warmth that lingers, the way sunlight remains encoded in stone after dusk. Hours later, headlines will cut the air again, louder than any snare hit. But for this sliver of dawn, the music rests, perfectly suspended, trusting the next downbeat to someone who keeps time beyond arenas. A pale shard of dawn slipped through a crack in the velvet drapes, limning dust motes that drifted like tired sparrows across the master bedroom of 100 North Carrollwood Drive. The house, 3 stories of curated glamour and hired hush, felt too large for the hour, as though every corridor were holding its breath for instructions. Michael Jackson sat upright on a tufted bench at the end of his bed, shoeless, spine straight, despite the watercolor fatigue bleeding through his limbs. Yesterday's stage jeans, frayed at the cuffs, hung loose. A simple V-neck tee clung to ribs noticeably sharper than the tour costumes allowed. He had not slept more than 40 minutes in sequence all night, yet his eyes, uneven pools of cocoa and liquid moonlight, were oddly lucid, the way glass sometimes clarifies directly before it cracks. From the hallway floated muffled steps. Conrad Murray checking medication inventories, arranging syringes against porcelain sinks that gleamed like sterile moons. The faint snap of latex gloves was the morning's first percussion, but Michael heard another rhythm beneath it, a throb in his ears that matched neither pulse nor melody, only the inexorable marching of seconds toward curtain call. No rehearsal today, technically. Still, in his mind, the O2 stage bloomed luminous, waiting, hungry. He rose, joints creaking a half-beat behind intention, and crossed to the writing desk near the balcony. Outside, jacaranda leaves rattled in a listless breeze, carrying the first scent of June bougainvillea. He cracked the French door 2 inches, letting humid air ghost across his forearms, then unclasped the red leather notebook, creased, corners ribbon soft from years of pilgrimage, and opened to a blank spread. The previous page held last night's set list scrawl, but he skipped it, unwilling to let commerce trespass on what he needed to say now. "Lord," he wrote, pen trembling just enough to slant the script, "grant me one more passage through the footlights. Not for fireworks, not for trophies. Let the people see. You are still remembered." Ink bled slightly into the grain. He drew a single staff in the margin and placed an open-hole note. "See natural again, centered but rootless. Neither key signature nor bar line to fence it." Beside it, "Let this tone be lighthouse, not spotlight." He paused, feeling the crucifix under his shirt tap a polite reminder against his sternum. Then, with deliberate care, he printed the verse that had followed him from limestone chapels to neon arenas. Matthew 5:16. Below it, in smaller hand, "So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." He capped the pen. Breathing shallow now, he closed the notebook, but did not slide it back into the drawer. Instead, he laid it atop a folded white envelope inked with 5 words. "For the girl who asked." The handwriting was steadier there, as though the very address steadied him. Footsteps approached. Murray's voice, soft with practiced bedside cadence, drifted through the ajar doorway. "Michael, it's time for your rest medication." "One moment," Michael called, not turning. His gaze lingered on the envelope. He imagined Abby, no, Anna now, surely grown, opening it someday and discovering the confession he had never dared show a camera. That thought, oddly gentle, loosened the fist of ache gripping his diaphragm. He closed the balcony door, shutting out garden birdsong already thinning beneath the skid of distant helicopters. The city was waking, but inside the room a hush gathered, velvet heavy. Michael walked to the nightstand, withdrew the Romanian wooden cross, and rolled it between thumb and forefinger, warming the grain that still retained, he liked to think, a child's fervent prayer. "Give me just a few minutes alone," he said when Murray entered in a white coat that looked too clinical for the Rococo wallpaper. The doctor hesitated, schedule pressing like tour managers' clipboards, but nodded and retreated, leaving a tray of milky propofol syringes on a silver trolley. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, cross-cupped in both palms, elbows on knees, head bowed. No words formed. Language felt redundant beside the hum of traffic beyond the gate. The air handler's sigh, the faint click of the grandfather clock in the foyer, marking 10:38 a.m. Yet in the marrow of silence, he sensed a presence filling the seams of time like gold leaf. Fear, surprisingly, did not rise. Only a spacious gratitude that flickered like candle shadow across tired muscle. When he lifted his head, Murray had returned. Plastic cap popped. Rubber stopper hissed. Michael lay back against mountain-white pillows, crucifix still enclosed in his fist. He felt the intravenous line kiss his skin, cool, almost tender. An exhale loosened every metronome of worry. Before anesthesia's tide engulfed shore, he managed one final internal whisper, a benediction not for himself, but for the unseen balcony of hearts he hoped to reach. "Shine through the cracks, even if the vessel breaks." Later, the room would erupt in the frantic choreography of resuscitation, compressions, epinephrine, the punctuation of desperate pleas. But in those first suspended minutes after consciousness escaped, an uncanny serenity hovered. Paramedics would remark on it, how his brow smoothed as if mid-dream, how fingers curled around a wooden cross so gently they might have been holding a sleeping bird. On the carpet, beside an overturned propofol vial, lay the red notebook, open to Matthew's verse, ink still drying. The city learned before noon. Cell towers jammed. News anchors stammered on live feed. Strangers clasped in street corners weeping without quite knowing why. Yet within Katherine Jackson's quiet Encino living room, an envelope already sat atop the mantel, hand addressed in looping script to Miss Anna Whitaker. No one but his mother knew its cargo. 5 pages of ink that began, "My little brave listener," and concluded, "I chose Christ because he stayed when silence grew loud." But that handoff belonged to another dawn. In the bedroom on Carrollwood Drive, stillness reclaimed sovereignty. Electrodes dangled, alarms silenced, latexed hands withdrew. Light from the same dawn shard shifted across the quilt, touched the crucifix, climbed the spine of the open notebook, and illuminated the solitary whole note, wordless, borderless, unfinished, resonating longer than any chord he had ever sung. The Jumbotron at Staples Center glowed like an artificial sun, washing the sea of mourners in cobalt and amber, as if grief deserved stage lighting. Choir risers groaned under the weight of singers trembling to find pitch in a hall saturated with sobs. A single white coffin, lacquered so finely it mirrored every floodlight, rested beneath bouquets that spilled fragrance into the air-conditioning vents, turning recycled breeze into a garden's last defiant hymn. When the opening organ swell rose, 30,000 voices exhaled in collective suspension, and for a heartbeat, the arena felt smaller than a living room, intimate enough to hear each sorrowing heart adjust its rhythm. Outside on Figueroa, fans pressed against barricades, candles clawing at daylight, homemade posters fluttering like exhausted wings. Satellite trucks jostled for line of sight to a signal that would beam lament around the globe. Yet amid the broadcast orchestra, camera cranes sweeping, reporters mouthing superlatives, one chair in the highest tier remained empty. Anna Whitaker, the girl who once asked a backstage legend about faith, stood instead in a pediatric oncology unit 80 miles away, tightening a slipknot on her surgical mask. Her patients did not pause for memorials. Leukemia cells honored no idols. The television in the nurses' lounge murmured highlights while Anna flushed IV tubing. She caught fragments, Mariah's trembling high note, Brooke Shields recalling innocence, a minister's eulogy comparing broken ribs and broken bread. But she did not linger. Her grief required motion, adjusting drip rates, smoothing a frightened toddler's brow, folding still warm blankets that smelled of detergent and childhood dreams, trying to survive chemotherapy. Somewhere between bed 5 and bed 8, her pager vibrated. Front desk, parcel. She imagined routine supplies, grabbed a latex-free glove box on her way, but the receptionist held a slim UPS envelope, international postage return address, Havenhurst Avenue, Encino. Her name on the label was penned in an older woman's hand, letters round, deliberate, motherly. Beneath clear tape, a second line glimmered. Per Michael's instruction. The hallway felt suddenly too narrow. Fluorescent panels hummed louder. She signed, pressed the packet to her chest like fragile glass, and retreated to the staff chapel, a room the size of a motel bathroom, tiled in beige, lit by a single votive flickering next to a faux stained glass panel. There she sat, palms damp, the silence yawning between her pulse beats. The flap came away with one careful tug. Inside lay an ivory envelope, edges worn as if carried for months in a pocket, and a note from Katherine Jackson. Anna, he remembered. Bless you for remembering too. KJ. Anna's throat constricted. She slid the inner envelope free. Its front, in unmistakable looping cursive, read, "For the girl who asked." She opened it. 5 pages of blue ink script unfurled, each line slanting uphill in restless sincerity. My brave listener, you once asked me why I believe. Years kept me from answering face to face, but silence carried the reply until paper could hold it. I did not choose Christianity the way one selects a station on the dial. I chose Christ because when the house emptied of applause, he was the only guest who remained seated, waiting for conversation. My songs are window glass. He is the view. If the glass cracks, do not stare at broken patterns. Step through to the meadow beyond. They spoke of me as if I were deity in sequins. Please learn from my mistake. Do not measure love by decibels. Measure it by persistence. When tabloids gnawed at my shadow, he called me by name, not headline. That is why I held on. So shine, Anna. Not neon, but candle. A candle can slip into corners neon can't reach. Michael. Tears blurred the final strokes. She pressed the pages to her lips, tasting salt and paper, then folded them with surgical precision. Outside, Monitors beeped arrhythms. A child whimpered for analgesic. Anna inhaled, stood, and knew what came next without deliberation. She photocopied the letter, 3 enlargements on the color machine normally reserved for educational posters, and laminated 1 copy in the rehab department's heat press. Back on Ward C, she taped the sheet at eye level on the wall where parents leaned while praying over infusion pumps. Beneath the laminate, Crayola drawings of superheroes clustered like eager understudies. Michael's words took center stage, yet never dwarfed them. Late shift's dusk settled purple against the window glass. 8-year-old Lila, bald beneath a crocheted cap dotted with cartoon bees, limped on socked feet to the letter, traced the cursive with her index finger. "Nurse Anna," she whispered, voice thin as spun sugar. "He was a heart doctor, wasn't he? Even if he didn't wear the coat." Anna crouched until their noses almost touched. "Yes, honey." He listened to hearts people said were too noisy. Lila smiled with solemn wisdom children borrow from the threshold of suffering, then shuffled back to bed, clutching a stuffed koala whose fur was graying from years of comfort. Visiting hours ended. Corridor lights dimmed to night mode indigo. Anna returned to the chapel, knees creaking as she knelt on vinyl pew bench. Hands clasped, she whispered, not an oration, merely breath shaped into confession. "I remember, Michael, and I forgive the world for its deafness." No tremor, no spectacle. Just a small, durable vow echoing off tile. Wind pressed against the chapel's vent grill, whistling like distant choir pipes. Somewhere beyond hospital walls, Los Angeles traffic roared, but here the hush felt thick enough to cup in palms. She pictured a wooden cross in a legendary hand, a notebook left open to light, and understood, testimony does not end when the voice falls silent. It only changes timbre, migrating into throats willing to keep singing. Back at the nurse's station, the laminated letter caught fluorescent glare, shining faintly. As Anna logged vitals, she glimpsed her reflection in that gloss, no longer the child asking, but the adult entrusted to answer through action. A peace settled, not absence of pain, but presence of purpose. And for the first time since the morning newscast shattered her childhood hero, she felt something mend, like a cracked window accepting dawn without splintering anew. Above Ward C, the ventilation system hummed a lullaby out of white noise. 2 floors down, a janitor paused by the lobby TV replaying memorial highlights on mute. Michael's golden casket gliding under spotlight. Brother's hand trembling on mic. Gospel choir flooding aisles. The janitor watched a moment, then nodded toward the elevator carrying him to scrub another hallway. Even in silence, the song endured. Far downtown, inside a modest house scented with talcum and nostalgia, Katherine Jackson settled into an armchair. Rosary sliding between fingers, arthritis had begun to stiffen. She pictured the letter arriving, imagined a young woman reading under hospital fluorescence, and felt a thread stitch 2 decades into single cloth. She murmured the verse Michael loved, "Let light so shine," and closed her eyes, trusting that some candles needed no match, only remembrance. In the ward, Lila slept, koala tucked beneath chin, monitors sketching green constellations across darkness. Beneath the laminated letter, the air conditioning vent fluttered a corner of superhero art. Superman, cape unfurled, flying toward a broken planet. The flutter looked almost like breathing, as if paper, too, could rise and fall with the steady cadence of hope. Paper wings beat once, twice, then settled, quiet at last, against the corkboard in Ward C. The laminated letter had stopped fluttering, but its ripple found other air to travel. By the next morning, a parent photographed the pages, and by evening, the image threaded through Facebook timelines like candlelight chasing darkness. From phone screens, it slipped into hearts, and there, unseen, uncounted, something began to rearrange. 3 months later, Times Square glimmered with 20-meter billboards advertising Michael Forever, the immersive experience. Neon fed on memory, ticket brokers fed on neon. A hologram promised the king returned. In a Midtown conference room, executives debated whether a line of branded energy drinks would monetize cross-demographics. PowerPoint slides glided past, projected revenue curves, licensing heat maps, arenas inked in corporate purple. The language of mercy, of broken crowns mended with song, never made the bullet points. Yet elsewhere, subtler drafts were turning. David Mercer, once the snark columnist who had live-tweeted every bead of sweat on Michael's brow during the 2005 trial, sat in a Brooklyn kitchen trying to tune a hand-me-down cassette deck. His 12-year-old son Ben, scavenger of thrift stores, wanted retro sound. The machine finally clicked, spooled ribbon, and out poured the faint hiss of history followed by a children's choir. Heal the world. Make it a better place. Ben's head swayed. David froze. He remembered ridiculing that very lyric on national radio, calling it bubble-wrapped sanctimony. Now, in the small apartment where his ex-wife's alimony left little extra, the song's plea felt less naive than necessary. Ben looked up. "He's my hero," he said simply. "He helped sick kids. You knew him, right?" "I covered him," David admitted, words tasting of rust. That night he reread his 2005 op-eds, scrolling past sarcasm that had once won him newsroom high fives. Each punchline now landed like a bruise on his own ribcage. Before dawn, he emailed Katherine Jackson's publicist requesting access to the family archive. "For a piece on Michael's philanthropy," he typed, reluctant to write, "for an apology my son deserves." The archive occupied a climate-controlled warehouse in Van Nuys, 12,000 square feet of boxed costumes, dati tapes, spiral notebooks. Fluorescents flickered like tired stage lights. An intern slid on nitrile gloves and handed Mercer a banker's box labeled "Private Devotional, Do Not Publish." Inside, a hotel notepad smudged with tears, a Vienna train ticket, pencil sketches of hands clasped in prayer. Beneath them lay a yellow legal pad, coffee-ringed, edges feathered. Across its top margin, Michael had scrawled in red crayon, "He was not in the temple. He was in the broken boy." 8 chords followed, just root notes, no melody, and a lyric fragment. "If love won't walk through locked doors, what God is it following?" Mercer sat on a metal stool, throat tightening. The warehouse AC hummed, dust motes hovered like muted spotlights. For the first time in 30 years of journalism, he felt unqualified to translate what lay before him. He copied nothing, photographed nothing. He simply closed the pad, thanked the intern, and walked into the noon heat carrying a notebook, suddenly far too light. Mercer's essay, published in The Atlantic on Easter 2014, opened, "I once mistook a wounded man for a punchline. I found, this week, the pages that reveal I had been staring at a confession and laughing at the handwriting." He recounted hospital donations buried in NDAs, late-night calls to burn ward parents, the Romanian cross. He quoted the unfinished lyric, framing it as the artist's thesis rather than epilogue. The piece trended, not viral with exclamation, but steady with reflection. Comment sections, usually minefields, read like candlelit vigils. cable panels expected outrage over another hagiography. Outrage never arrived. Instead, a veteran anchor confessed on air that man in the mirror drove him to volunteer at a shelter. A pop culture podcast replaced its sarcastic sting music with an acoustic cover of You Are My Life. Something had shifted. Celebrity discourse traded the currency of spectacle for a quieter, tender testimony. Meanwhile, in a Pasadena editing suite, filmmaker Ling Tran sifted through 600 hours of family-licensed footage for a documentary originally pitched as Thriller: The Business. Ling kept pausing on B-roll the producers dismissed. Michael on a children's cancer ward floor, matching Lego colors with 6-year-old. Michael slipping $20 to a janitor outside a New York arena. The unseen song fragment Mercer referenced haunted her. She asked the estate for the notebook. They refused. Instead, Catherine invited her to Encino. The Jackson matriarch served chamomile tea in porcelain thin as moth wings. She produced a photocopy of the lyric, slid it across oak polished by decades of elbows. Ling read, tears threading lashes. "Tell that story," Catherine whispered. "The one my son hoped someone might finish." The documentary, retitled Broken Boy, premiered at Tribeca 2015. No CGI zombie walks, no glove close-ups. Instead, archival audio of bedtime prayers, testimony from nurses, a final montage under the crayon lyrics sung by a Harlem youth choir. Critics accustomed to pyrotechnic nostalgia used words like penitential, reverent, unexpectedly sacred. Box office returns were modest. Cultural impact was not. University ethics courses assigned the film. Sunday homilies quoted the red crayon verse. A commentator on NPR concluded, "Perhaps we were never watching a god in a costume, but a pilgrim trying to stay kind." One fog-blunted morning in 2015, journalist David Mercer arrived at a London soundstage where a new hologram review rehearsed. Script in hand, he politely declined a backstage tour. Instead, he stepped outside, dialed his son. "Ben," he said, voice nearly swallowed by North Acton drizzle, "remember the article? They want a sequel on the tech show. Will you do it?" "I think," he replied, smiling into gray sky, "the story I needed to tell is already told." He ended the call, walked toward the tube, and hummed a melody no stadium had ever heard. 8 root notes Michael had left for the world to finish. In Encino, that same hour, Catherine slid Mercer's article into a cedar box beside Abby Anna's letter and the Romanian cross. She closed the lid, exhaled a benediction, half sigh, half song, and felt, perhaps for the first time since June 2009, the tectonic weight of public opinion shift from suspicion to something resembling prayer. Outside, jacarandas bloomed extravagant purple against smog-soft sky. Petals drifted onto the lawn like quiet applause no entrepreneur could capture, no cynic could dismiss. They simply fell, perfuming the air, proof that legacy sometimes blossoms only after we stop selling the seeds. A river of dusk seeps through the high windows of St. Gabriel Children's Hospital, sluicing lavender across polished linoleum. Monitors dim to night mode teal. Hallway sconces drop to half-brightness, like voices lowered out of respect for dreams just forming. Inside room 417, 9 oncology patients, IV trees creaking softly, satin head wraps glowing under indirect light, pull blankets to chins as nurse Anna Whitaker settles onto a low stool. She balances an old-fashioned cassette player on her knee. The plastic clicks, tape reels spin, and the faint instrumental of Speechless exhales like remembered lullaby. Anna unfolds a sheet of laminated paper already furred at the corners from 100 gentle hands. "Tonight," she says, brushing silver strands behind one ear, "I'm not reading a fairy tale. I'm reading a letter." The children still, intravenous lines catching glints like fireflies, briefly free. Anna's voice dips into the hush. "I chose Christ because when the house emptied of applause, he remained seated, waiting for conversation. Do not measure love by decibels. Measure it by persistence. Shine, not neon, but candle." Syllables land feather-soft, yet cast long shadows, filling corners where morphine and fluorescent cheerfulness cannot trespass. Outside the door, orderlies slow their carts to listen, wheels whispering across parquet as though respect itself has physical weight. When Anna finishes, she folds the pages against her heart, eyes closed, not in performance but homage. And silence rests over the room, warm as quilts pulled from a grandmother's cedar trunk. Then a boy's voice, thin but steady, ripples the quiet. "Miss Anna?" he asks, skin translucent beneath auburn stubble of regrowing hair. "That's the real Michael Jackson, not a cartoon." "The real one," she answers, smiling with gravity. "And yes, he prayed, just quieter than most." The boy nods, absorbing the notion that legends, too, speak in whispers. At that moment, the door nudges open. A woman steps in, mid-30s, wind-flushed cheeks, scarf smelling of autumn rain. In her hand dangles a small wooden cross, its grain worn satin smooth. She mouths an apology for the intrusion, eyes drifting from saline bags to paper angels dangling from ceiling tiles. Anna recognizes that kind of searching gaze, a parent balancing on the fault line between hope and surrender. "Visiting hours ended," she says gently, "but come in. We were just finishing." The woman approaches the boy's bed. Tears wobble in her lashes, yet do not fall. She touches his wrist with fingertips feather light, then turns to Anna and lifts the cross. "My grandfather wanted this returned to anyone who needed it," she whispers. "He said it once belonged to the man who sang stories." Anna's breath catches. She knows the artifact instantly, the Romanian child's gift Michael carried through trial and triumph. The circle tightens like a seed pod finally ripe. She cups the cross. Warmth, impossibly, throbs through the wood, as if kindness leaves residue the way perfume lingers in lace. "I think," Anna says, voice rough, "he'd want your son to keep it now." She presses the necklace into the boy's palm. The child closes fingers. The cross disappears into fist. Yet the room brightens, subtle but certain, as though someone turned up the moon. 2 days later, Anna visits Encino. Catherine Jackson welcomes her into a bungalow that smells of chamomile and old vinyl sleeves. Time has narrowed Catherine's frame, but not her gaze. Those eyes, still fierce, still mother-wide, study the nurse like an archivist appraising rare parchment. "Michael told me you'd honor the letter," Catherine says, guiding Anna past a hallway quilted in family photos. "I wanted to thank you in person." They sit in a parlor where afternoon sun freckles dust into constellations. Between them rests a shoebox of correspondences, field service notebooks, unsent postcards, a faded airline ticket to Vienna still dusted with incense memories. Catherine lifts a small journal, its leather brittle, elastic, long snapped. "It's blank," she smiles, "except the first page." Anna opens to find a single sentence in Michael's looping cursive. Love never dies. It simply changes address. Catherine closes Anna's fingers around the journal. See that, children, fill the rest, she instructs. Turn his echo into their chorus. They embrace, two women stitched into the same long hymn, verses apart, yet now singing in unison. Back at St. Gabriel's, a new ritual germinates. Each child receives one page from the empty journal and a felt-tip pen. Some draw galaxies, some scribble jokes. One outlines a dancing figure wearing mismatched socks. The auburn-haired boy writes a single line, tongue poking between teeth in concentration. I don't know if God is real, but if he was, maybe he looked a little like Michael. He slips the page into the journal, adds the wooden cross as bookmark, and hands it to Anna. For the next kid, he declares, solemn as a knight dubbing another. Anna shelves the journal in the ward library alongside glossy superhero comics. Within days, pages flower, prayers, confessions, haiku, stick figure epics, like wild ivy refusing domestic trellises. Word spreads, other departments request readings of That Singer's Letter. Nurses ferry photocopies between NICU isolates and geriatric wards. A custodian tucks one under the coffee machine for night shift staff. A pharmacist pins one beside controlled substance logs. The candlelight Michael once described leaps corridor to corridor, entirely unconcerned with decibel levels. Months pass. On a rain-rinsed morning, the hospital rooftop garden blooms. Lavender, rosemary, daisies nodding like tiny parachutes. And Anna pauses during rounds. She gazes through misted glass at concrete stretching toward downtown skyscrapers. Squadrons of cars glint below, scurrying like urgent ants. But inside the garden a hush vibrates, applause withheld for the sake of wonder. She reflects. Fame tried to commodify him. Trials tried to shatter him. Time finally stilled him. Yet none managed to cancel the simple engine that drove every glove, every ledger-breaking donation, every bedside lullaby. Persistent love. The type that outlives body, melody, scandal, even memory. Because it jumps hosts, refuses extinction, reappears in the tremor of a boy's handwriting, or the resolve in a nurse's nightly reading. Nurse manager's voice crackles over intercom. Bedtime. Anna heads to 417, cassette ready. As the first instrumental measures float, she feels story settling into place. Pain acknowledged, hope rehoused, circle closed, but not sealed. The children listen. The cross glimmers, half hidden beneath knit blankets. Somewhere deep, Anna hears Michael's quiet laughter, grateful, not for being remembered, but for being useful. Outside, evening unfurls like velvet. Overhead, a drone camera, perhaps filming a traffic update, rises accidentally above the hospital roof. Were its operator listening, he might notice faint music curling upward. A few humble chords, the rustle of pages. A woman's low voice saying, "That's why he believed. Because love is the only thing that never did." The drone climbs higher. City lights scatter below like embers. For an instant, the hospital glows brighter than the rest. Not neon, but candle, precisely as requested.